at the
I'll let you do the
second.
I'll let you do the welcome live. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Good man.
Okay, cool. Welcome everyone to the second day of our hearings. So good morning councillors, staff, submitters and those watching live to the second day of submissions. So this morning for our hearing, it's if we just go through the rules, you could say. This is a information gathering part of the meeting. The normal process is for submitters to be given 5 minutes to speak to their submission and a further 5 minutes to answer questions. The questions from elected members to the submitter are to clarify matters raised in their submission only and not to give opinions. Questions posed by submitters to council are not normally answered at this setting. Specific comment questions are often answered in our response to submitters at the end of the process. Questions to officers are normally dealt with in deliberation phase. So the Chair has the discretion to vary from normal process. So with those few announcements, we'll get underway. And the first submitters this morning, out of the block, Harley Gundry. Welcome, Harley.
Thank you.
Okay, if you just turn your...
Introduce myself as Harley Gundry. My wife and I have lived in the community all our lives, and we just appreciate the opportunity to come along here and have our little input to what's happening in Ashburton. Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to say, and I'm not trying to be negative on everything, just how we write it down. Firstly, I'd like to say how disappointing it is that the council hasn't kept up the maintenance to the required standard of the Tynwell Pool over the previous years. It would be, but will now be another asset lost from our community. If the council has limited funds for water-based leisure, I see only one option, and that is to extend the existing EA network centre to include another indoor pool and extend the water play area. As grandparents, we spend quite a bit of time in this area, and we do notice how busy it gets in there and how limited their area is when it's fully, when there's a lot of children and people there. And we find it is actually a great facility, but I think we need more there. If we can, it would be great to build the hydroslide there, but the main intention from our submission is to actually just extend the pool area. It is essential for the community to have a high quality swimming complex for learning to swim. At present, the EA Networks complex is the only water sports facility available in Mid-Canterbury. It is underestimated how important this facility is for children and families, and has to continue to be developed. To build a new outdoor pool anywhere to only be used over a short period of time each year would be a waste of council and public money. I'd like to support the council initiatives on upgrading the district parks and playgrounds. Once again, it is essential to have family-friendly areas. Possibly this budget could be increased to fund these and upgrade to a higher level, especially our playgrounds. As we notice a lot of people travel to Timaru and Christchurch to use some of the specialised playgrounds that these areas supply. I'm a wee bit disappointed in the council on the waste of money on some projects, and this is our opinion, to tell the community we can't fund projects that the community wants. A prime example being the 2.4 million spent on Bering Square redevelopment. There was no need for the Boer Memorial to be shifted. This was a total waste of money. The council has qualified staff doing a great job around town on gardens, etc., who could have done the new design of gardens, etc., at a fraction of the cost with some support from local contractors. And we do ask the question that, do the staff and these people have the opportunity to do overtime when there's a lot of extra work like this available? So that was just a few little things on our submission that we just wanted to speak to. So I appreciate that and thank you.
Thank you, Harley. It's open for questions from councillors.
Tony?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Harley, for your submission. I note in there you talk about the green waste, the curbside green waste collection. You think it's an unnecessary expense for ratepayers, which is fine.
Yeah.
What do you do with your green waste? How do you dispose of that?
We compost it.
Compost, yeah.
And the other reason we both believe that is that with the landfill, that which are totally against, because the governments don't build waste burning things to create power to get rid of it. We should not be filling up all our land with waste. But if we are going to do that, I thought it was only common sense that green waste should go into the landfill to help break down everything that's in there, because green waste is going to break down and disappear in landfills. So why we're going to collect it and put it into compost and that separately, I didn't see much point in it.
Okay.
It is actually a natural disposing compost, so it's not going to do that much harm in a landfill. I know there's a cost to get it there, but there's a cost in everything to shift stuff.
Thank you.
So thank you. Okay.
Any further questions? If not, thank you, Harley, for
Thank
coming
you.
along.
I appreciate
and,
your
submitting. Well done. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, our next submitter, Jan Cochran. Welcome, Jan.
Good morning, Councillor Todd.
Get over Friday night?
Pardon?
Get over Friday night?
I did.
But we won't
3
go
o'clock
any-
in the morning. Not expected. Right.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Councillor Todd, the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Councillors. Thank you for allowing me just to remind you that I'm here as Jean Cochran and not as a former timing officer in this seat. So these are from me. Just from the submission, I guess for me the stadium is priority. Working in an environment where I've been part of the indoor setup and leading up to it, the build, and then obviously working within the confined space of Sports House, I see, and I think you should all be applauded for the planning, and looking at that 3-court option would be the priority. There's such a gridlock on court space currently, so I think that is great, but the current sports in there cannot develop, cannot extend competitions. It is a very tight schedule in there, and we know of people that are still training and having to opt outside when in actual fact it's just complicated for everyone inside. I like the idea of the main court, and I think that was excellent. It's something I always fought for prior to the build, was because that will bring high performance teams to perform in front of our community, and I think that with the community it has become such a community asset that has been very positive. But when you go to Crusaders, tactics games, you see Ashburton people everywhere, and therefore they're travelling. So we can bring those. Obviously they're not going to bring the whole season down here, but one game off would be absolutely fantastic. But then you'd have people being able to train here prior. We would invite more tournaments, we would cater for more tournaments, and I think that's only just not for EA networks and spectators, for the teams with a great facility, but also it will provide an economic increase to our town. So obviously my priority would be that. We know through data that time is moving on, and socially it is becoming a really valuable asset as well. We have a multicultural population now, and we know that these people come into the town and they still want to be part of their own group until they can be integrated into what we would call as our normal sporting groups, recreational groups, even play groups. And we understand, well, we have to understand them. So I think that that would also provide areas for them to be able to set up their own environment. Previous in the current role, in the role I had, these groups would come to me and say, look, we will come in time. But communication is often a barrier as well. So I do believe that that would be the priority for council. I think on that, it would only be such a positive move, because also sitting where I used to sit, there were people previous that were against the build of EA Networks Centre, but I can tell you I watch them walk in there regularly. And I often would have liked to go out and say, are you happy? You know, not to be derogative in any way, but just to know that there are so many people using that facility. And I agree with the previous submitter that being a grandparent now, and I've just had 5 in the last 2 weeks with me, going down to that pool is such an exciting place for children to go to. So I think that not only did we play in the pools, but we took a ball and was able to kick a few balls on a court. Exciting, the start for well-being, wellness. But I also think now it used to be the story of kids in sports stay out of courts. It's now families play together, stay together. So we are looking to the future. I was also initially in Mid-Canterbury when they discussed for the centennial year whether we build Bering Square or a sports facility. Look what we did, that's fine, but let's not hold back now. Stakeholders will always agree when they see the results and positive for what is happening in our community. I think that under current governance and management of our EA networks, which is probably a lot the public don't see, it is very positive, it is very focused, and the group are very determined to ensure that we can extend programs. They are quality programs, they are focused, they're determined. And I think I left my job at the wrong time, actually, because I loved that group. I thought they were a fantastic group, and to be complimented to Sarah Mosley in leading that at the time, and with Hamish Riak. So I guess it's time for you to ask me the questions, but I really feel that the council are moving in the right way, and that's, I haven't sat here before and said that so positively. So yes, one other thing was just to applaud the council too on the Couch to Wellness program that they have set up when green prescription was taken from the program due to funding channels. And another area that I would like to say is that these other groups coming in, a lot of people will talk about their financial barriers, but currently in a lot of funding areas there is a focus on Māori, Pacifica and immigration people that they can apply to help them be integrated into play, active recreation and sport, which we can all help them with.
Thank you, Jen. Excellent. Questions? Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Jan, for your submission. I see also that you're supporting the hydroslide option, and had a quick, do you think the advantage of that is it's there 12 months of the year and operating 12 months of the year, where an outdoor pool only has a limited time, 4 or 5 months each year it'll be open, and in that period do you think it would be well used, the hydro slide throughout the whole year?
Personally, this is again the visiting family prior to one member of my family moving back to Ashburton. We visited the Porirua complex, has hydro slides. Currently visit Queenstown regularly, hydro slides. Every time I've been there, and it's right throughout the year, yes, they are well utilised, and it is all groups, rangatahi, tamariki and parents, but not myself. But I see it as being an ideal adrenaline area for our young people in the town. It's another area, but I would still prioritise the court before hydro slides, but definitely it needs to stay in the plan and be looked at, and they're always used. You can go to Timaru and it's not as adrenaline pumping, but it's definitely always used.
Thanks. Councillor Hooper.
Vicky, hi Jen. Do you see netball mid-Canterbury and basketball mid-Canterbury contributing in any way to an extension or fundraising in a way as well? Or do you see it all sitting with council?
I think sports have a responsibility, but I don't think I can answer that on a financial terms. But they're both very positive sporting groups, but why should it just be them? I think it's probably a community effort. Prior to building EA Networks, the community went out and fundraised together. I was part of that group, initial group in fundraising, and I think that's probably, rather than focusing just on 2 sports, we actually want to develop for all sports, all recreation. So maybe there would be a group set up to help go down that line again.
Thanks.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Morning, Jan. The stadium extension's not scheduled for another 5 to 7 years, I think 2029 to 31. Do you think we've got the timing right on that?
Obviously, I'd like it sooner, and I'm guessing the sports would like it sooner, because we all know that as time moves on, so do the dollars move up, and that's a bit of a concern. We've seen it in the bridge, we've seen it just on anything that, from the original planning of EA Networks and what was left out, and was originally signed off and then left out in the build, and what it costs to restructure and put that extra seating in, the seating by the pool. So it would be great to work for. Yes, there will be a huge increase, but I think the increases to delay even longer would be even more so a massive increase.
Any more questions, councillors? If not, thank you, Jan, for coming along.
And thank you, and I do think that really what you have done in the last, as a council, you have to be applauded for. It's fantastic.
Thank you. The next person to arrive was a guy called Jeff, but I don't know whether we have a Jeff here, do we? No, we don't.
We have no sign of Jeff at this stage.
We'd go on to Jenny Ray. Yeah. Jenny Ray? Is she not here either? No. Okay. Okay, councillors, we'll pause until our next presenter does arrive. So we have a new person that's going to volunteer to pop in ahead of schedule, Tina Cox, and her submission is on page 977,
Which volume?
volume 1. 2. Oh. Volume 2, 977. Welcome, Tina.
Hi.
Thank you for stepping in.
Well, I wasn't actually originally supposed to speak up to you, but it was all changed.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm not sure what happened there, but anyway, it was supposed to be today. Okay, so I'm here because of the Tynwald pool. I'm just a very passionate wife, mother and grandmother who lived in Tynwald for 46 years until just recently. I was part of a committee that ran the pool back when my children were young. We had a roster in the summer and did maintenance in the off-season and fundraise for general upkeep and running costs. And since then, I've also spent many, many years every summer taking my grandchildren as well. Unfortunately, since the council took it back over, we just think the maintenance has been sadly lacking. And we were very disappointed to hear just prior to opening last year that it wasn't going to open at all. We felt we should have been informed about that sooner. The year prior to the pool closing early due to lack of the previous year it was closed early due to lack of lifeguards. And some of these lifeguards that were over there had told another friend they hadn't trained any new lifeguards for some time, and that's why they weren't available. A member of the public who had the appropriate qualifications had offered her services voluntarily for another month, so it wouldn't close early, but she was told no. Not everything needs to be in Ashburton. Tynwald is part of Ashburton, and you already have the indoor pool, so why can't the outdoor pool stay at Tynwald? The domain and camping ground has been upgraded in recent years and now has a new basketball court and disc golf. These should encourage more holiday makers to camp there and feel that the pool would be added revenue from those people as well. Bringing more people into the town helps everybody, restaurants, shops, cafes, the more amenities we have here for people to encourage people to come into Ashburton, the better, as well as for our own local people. We also think, that if public amenities were meant to make money, then we wouldn't have the art gallery or EA Network still running, because I gather that they don't make a profit. I know that we have to submit submissions if we want to see change or don't agree with what you do, but you've also created social media platforms, including Facebook, and feel that if you don't want people to have a say on these platforms, then don't have them. But I don't feel that you probably read a lot of what people put on there, because not everybody wants to come and speak like this, including me. I hate doing public speaking about anything, but I'm very passionate about this, so that's why I've come. So please don't ask me any curly questions.
Thank you, Tina. You've done well.
Cool.
Okay, Councillor Hooper.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say exactly the same. Well done. It is daunting talking like this, so good work. Yep, as you know, I live over in Tynwald and love the Tynwald domain. What are your thoughts on 3 months a year, though? A lot of money being spent for 3 months a year compared to, for example, a hydroslide that's open 12 months a year, or doing nothing at all in these tough times.
The Geraldine pool has solar heating panels, and they're open for a lot longer. I think you could look at that option. But that's what outdoor pools are. They're not open all year round. So I don't feel that's an argument, really.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Hi, morning Tina.
Hi.
We had quite a few comments, and there's been a few submissions from people saying that How about we put a paddling pool in at the Tynwald Domain? And I know on the open day when we were there were a lot of people talking about how it's a great spot for picnicking and families together. What are your thoughts on having a paddling pool instead of having a bigger pool like what's there?
No, I wouldn't accept that option at all.
So it needs to be all or nothing.
Yeah.
Cool. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Sina. You know on which side I am. My question to you, if the EA centre get it instead of Tynwald, how do you feel that?
Well,
Of course, that is in 3 months as well. That
yes,
doesn't make a difference.
Exactly. But you've already got the indoor pool at EA. Why can't Tynwald have the outdoor pool, is my thoughts. Like, nobody will probably go into the EA networks if that outdoor pool is open there, because nobody likes going. No one I talk to with kids and grandkids likes going to EA networks because of the stuffiness, the noisiness, and particularly in summer, it's just far too hot in there to even sit and watch your grandchildren swim.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? If not, thank you, Tina,
Great.
for stepping
Thanks
in.
for listening.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Jenny Ray. Welcome,
Tell me
Jenny.
how I work this.
Yep,
It's on?
it's going. The red light's on, so you're live.
Thank you.
Okay.
Morena Koto, I'm Jenny Ray. I'm the Youth Centre Coordinator at Base Youth Centre. And I wanted to speak to you guys about my submission around the Youth Advisory Group and Youth Mentor. So I've got notes here and glasses. Okay, I'm here today regarding a long-term plan submission to establish a YAG, a Youth Advisory Group with council support, and seek to employ additional investment to employ Youth Mentor. A Youth Advisory Group, starting there, I want to start with the statement from the MYD website. Now more than ever, community leaders are realising the positive connection between involving young people in community activities and the increase in community vitality and engagement. Young people bring energy and ideas to standard issues and concerns and often have a unique perspective on how best to tackle challenges and opportunities. The Youth Council has been a valued tool in our community for learning and developing governance, leadership, teamwork and a voice for our rangatahi, giving insight also into the local government. A youth advisory group with Base will run on a similar process as the Youth Council, but sit externally with Youth Specialist Agency, giving youth development opportunities to focus, and the focus being on supporting and enhancing youth voice, ideas, leadership and mentoring. What are we proposing? A similar group consisting of 10 young people who are interviewed and go through that process, young leaders. Ideally, we'd love to see a district council because we still want to keep that connection between the voice of our local government and the rangatahi in our district. And then also a representative from our youth professionals as a mentor and advocate. This would also mean that there need to be some funding with that, because just even in the month that I've been exploring why you guys disband, and then how do we keep this youth voice going, and who connects in, connecting in with the Christchurch participation group who are represented by youth councils and youth advisory groups. So you guys aren't the only ones that disband. There's other youth, they've formed other groups that are external, and it's a good model. Like, I feel like if it's in a youth space with people who get young people, then you will get more voice and enhancement from them. Sadly, the young people that aren't on your youth council anymore have been discouraged, but they are keen to get back into representing the community. Okay, so that's pretty much all I want to say about that. Secondly, that youth mentor position, investing in young people and investing in that future. So many of our district councils invest in youth workers. They give that value and the foresight to building the supports for the future and to raise our young people in a strong village. The proposed position would be managed by the Base Youth Centre Board of Trustees, and we are seeking to establish a full-time position. Currently, there are 2 part-time positions at the centre. We have a youth Hype Youth Health Centre position, which is 20 hours a week, and a base coordinator position. What we're kind of proposing is that you were to fund a youth worker that could sit around roles, actually, be working in the library as well. You've got some vulnerable people just coming in during the day. You actually need someone popping in on them that can talk to young people. There's no point in going in guns blazing. These kids need some support. Anyway, so what we're proposing is if you provide a full-time worker, then we can actually split that role 20 hours and have 2 full-time workers, which actually means we create more youth development opportunities, able to have younger people come in and be supported by older people like myself and Camilla. But, you know, actually being able to give stepping stones for young people who want to get into that youth industry. As you know, there's always going to be young people. We all grow up and we all start new families. A current snapshot for our community, before the recent government cuts, which has been impactful, we had a 10% cut from OT contracts, which actually meant that that our government roles were reduced. So we have OT that still remain 2 social workers down. Safe Mid Canterbury's operating with a waiting list on their youth support position and has picked up on a high risk level instead of working at that low to moderate space. He Wakatapu's youth support position was full time. It's now merged in with the whānau order position, so that mahi now is joint. That loses another 20 hours a week for our rangatahi. And also in the early intervention space, it doesn't leave anyone working there. All our agencies are working in that high risk mental health and challenging space, and the community agencies, they have to work to that contract. That's what they get. So what I'm proposing is that we look at, can the council invest in a youth worker who can meet the early intervention need? Yeah, and that's my little speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina Ray. Okay, question from councillors. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Jenny, for your submission. It's nice to get someone coming in with a new idea to benefit the district. Just a question for you. The cost of a youth worker, because when we get into deliberations, we have to start talking money.
Yep.
So what sort of cost do you think it is to have to pay a youth worker for a year?
Well, I think if we're looking at full-time, then we need to look at that living wage space. At the moment, when we, at Safe Mid Canterbury, when we've tried to employ staff, if you're looking at young people, none of them will come to work for under $28 an hour. So we really need to looking at that $30 to $34 an hour, depending on skill level. Yeah.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Hi, Jenny. Just thinking about the funding for the youth workers, so would you think that they would be employed by council and then they're sort of working the hours here and then going over to you, or would it be sort of a grant situation where you applied for a grant and that funding covered their employment?
I think the grant space would be an easier, less complicated way to manage that. Yeah.
Yeah.
However, it could work in. Yeah, open to anything.
Councillor Hooper.
Thank you. Hi, Jenny. I think the Youth Council, Youth Advisory Group's a great idea. You also mentioned in your submission about a youth committee and action group. Would that sort of not come out of your advisory group? Is that sort of not an offshoot of, you know?
So I guess it's them making a decision on what they want to be called, but actually a youth action group or advisory group is up to them. I feel like a youth advisory group will be great for council, but also for other agencies who are wanting a youth voice, want to know where we're at. We can all assume where they're at, but in actual fact, until you ask a young person what's happening in the community for them, you don't know. So, yeah, yes, it would come out of that as well.
Yeah, well, if they, if you're wanting volunteers for,
Yeah.
glow in the park or something like that, then maybe they could be asked out of that advisory group.
So, yeah, and so that advisory group could be the advisory committee, but what we're saying is there could be an action group, a subcommittee of young people that don't want to put that commitment in, but
Right.
want to be helping.
Okay.
And so the action group will be the ones that can volunteer at those events. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor McMillan.
Just another quick question. What's the Whakatiri Young Professionals Group? Who are
So they are a group of young people who work in our community under 25, might be under 30 actually, that are in professional jobs. So they meet regularly, but it would be really cool to have one of them represent and mentor our young people.
Okay.
Excellent. No further questions, councillors? Thank you, Jenny Ray, for
Thank you.
coming along.
No problem.
Excellent, thank you.
Bye-bye.
The next matter is John Rushton. And it's page 992.
Right.
Welcome, John.
Oh, thank you. So I was going to do a general thing. I reckon the green waste bins should be increased to the 240 litre size because we live now on Grey Street. You see an awful lot of green waste going in the reed bins from the elderly people that have got a little garden and yeah. So then getting on to the Tinmore pool, I reckon the Tinmore pool should be closed but rebuilt at the EA Network Centre, and I was suggesting that if they put foundations in, like we did when they covered the college pool years ago, there was a lot of work that had to be done after the pool was built to cover the pool. And during the Christmas holidays we went to Alexandra and then Blenheim, and both of them happened to have outdoor pools that even at Christmas there was not many people using, but the inside pools were busy being used. And it could be that it's the way of the future that pools are inside. So I thought if they did the foundation work with a new pool, that it could easily just be a matter of putting a roof over the top rather than rebuilding foundations and God knows what. So then 3, the Balmoral Hall. I think you should keep the Balmoral Hall, but sell the land that's around the Polytech, and that could be used for funding the Balmoral Hall for the future. Because while it's still an old hall, it still gets used. You know, you walk past there on a weekday and there seems to be an awful lot of kids and mothers and people hanging around there. And if it could be used more, it's just not concentrating everything at EA Networks. Right, now the reason I really came. Stockwater. I think that the council should get out of the stock water business. They're not what they used to be years ago, where you had the likes of old guys like Ted Rollinson that would drive through the farm and find out where a flood or a blockage was, and it would be cleared, and they'd drive on. If you look at a map for around our area now, and I came here yesterday and got one, there's very few blue lines. I'll pass that around. There's a map of our farm as it fits in.
You just had to use the microphone, John.
Yeah. Right. So there's lots of black lines where races used to be, and very few blue lines where water is now. And we've been trying for 6 years to close a water race, and I gather we're getting down to one farmer who thinks that they're a sheep and beef farmer that grazes just dairy support animals. And they've got irrigation water and BCI water right on their boundary fences. So it's very disappointing. And one of the problems we've got with the main stock water race now is it's been redirected around beside the RDR and along, and when the water race, the main water race floods, it floods our cattle yards. So even though it's 2 kilometres away, the main stock water race comes across the neighbouring farm, following the old course of the water race, and gets into the stock water race, which comes straight down and floods us. So in the middle of July, when all the cows are going home, we can't load them out because the council's just flooded our cattle yards, which creates all sorts of animal health problems. Now, the other thing I was thinking about was the minimum price for someone to have water supplied to them. The council suggested $750 minimum, and I'm suggesting it should be $1,000 minimum, because that would mean that if you've got 10 or 20 metres of water race coming to you, and it's come 7 or 8 kilometres, you've got to really, really want to have 20 metres of water race running into your property to supply you, because the BCI and MHV will provide water for less than that. And the last point I'd like to make is if a water race is having to be kept open for the guy that really wants to have 20 metres of water race, there should be some sort of compensation for the upstream users, because it's seriously expensive to keep these races open if they're not being used. Because it's costing us $2,000 a year in water rates, but it's costing us $4,000 a year to clean it, because we have to clean it twice a year, because it silts up because of the amount of silt that comes down into the main water race, or into our water race. So that's it for water races. The number 5 was that I want I'd like to see the EA networks extended for 5 courts. So, yeah, that's my submission.
Thank you, John. Councillors, questions? Councillor Wilson.
Good morning, John. It's to do with, you've mentioned there that it's caused us to fail advanced mitigation. Could you just expand on what that means? I probably understand, but a lot of councillors won't understand what that means.
Right, so we're BCI irrigators, and we failed our advanced mitigation because when the water was flooding us from the council, the main race, it's created wet spots on the farm, and when we got audited, these wet spots were clearly visible, and now we have to, well, we've failed our advanced mitigation, and the potential is that we may have to reduce the amount of land that we irrigate. So currently we irrigate 360 hectares, and we could be cut back to about 250, 270 hectares of irrigatable area. So that's going to be quite a significant loss or cost to us. And it's all because of these main races.
Another question that sort of follows on a bit, John. So, if we got rid of the water race, where would the flood water go then, or what should happen to it?
Okay, so the race that's causing us problems is going across country, and it acts like a wing wall. So it directs the water towards where our cattle yards is. If the water race that went across country wasn't there, it would just follow the natural contour and go back into the existing main race and follow the natural contour on down. So it would just dry out and disappear.
Yeah, Brown.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, John, for your submission. 2 questions. Are you above or below the RDR?
We're below.
Below. And whereabouts do you get your stock water from now if you don't use stock water races or want them?
Right, so at the moment we get it out of the stock water race, but if we weren't using the stock water race, where we source our stock water is beside our BCI offtake, so we would just hook into BCI.
Thank you.
It would be straightforward.
We have time for one more quick question, Councillor Mackle.
Thank you, and thank you, John, and I'd like to commend you on your common sense approach with your submission. Just one question, the Polytech land, what would you envisage would happen with that if it was sold, if it wasn't used for car parking for the district?
Well, it depends what it's zoned. Is it commercial or is it residential? I don't know, to be honest. But there must be somebody that could come up with a bright idea. We don't need another Eastfields car park sitting there for years and years. So if an Eastfields is built, well, maybe it would become a car park because it's council-owned land. But there needs to be something done that the centre of our town is developed rather than new buildings way out on West Street and over by the bridge. It's almost as though the middle of town is becoming an area for second-hand shops and cafes.
Thank you, John. Another quick question from
Very quick.
Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. John, Federated Farmers are presenting later today, and I've read their submission already, and they are talking about the water races, suggesting that we take 10 years to exit from the water races. What do you think of that? And do you agree, if you haven't seen Federated Farmers' submission, they'll put it in on your behalf, I think, as well.
Okay.
Yeah. But what do you think of exiting over 10 years instead of 3 is what we're proposing?
Well, you can see that there would be areas where a slow approach would work, particularly above the RDR. There's areas that they source their water out of the Ashburton River through Mount Somers Township and down to the RDR, and the same with over Montalto. So it has to be thought about, but ultimately there needs to be a better way of delivering water. When you think that there's over 2.5 cubics of water taken for stock water, and you're only using 32 litres a second for actual animals, the rest of it disappears. So ECAN are telling you guys that you're meant to maintain water in the river, and here you are, you're irrigating the plains with it.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
No further questions. So thank you, John, for coming along and submitting today.
Okay,
Much appreciated.
thank you.
Our next submitter is Darryl Hydes. Morning, Darryl.
Hi,
Welcome.
thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I would like to mainly speak about the stockwater races too. And so, although I would prefer that the stockwater races were kept open, I accept that it mostly is inevitable that the council will withdraw from supplying stockwater eventually. But I believe that withdrawing the supply in 3 years this doesn't give a lot of farmers sufficient time to investigate and install alternative supplies, and for some the capital cost will be considerable, and just with the current economic situation will be very difficult for some people. Another point is that in many parts of the district the stockwater races do have an important role to fill in floodwater drainage. Our area below Methven is a good example, and when there's a heavy rainfall forecast, the council staff will shut off the intake, and this allows the stormwater from Methven to flow down the races without causing excessive flooding over our property, over our crops and our roads. I believe that the council should probably investigate which races are helping the flood control and which ones add to the problem, as John was talking about. And now would be a perfect time for this, after all the many flood events we've had in recent years. Another aspect that concerns me is that in a major rural fire, the water races provide a critical water supply, which I've personally seen several times when you have multiple fire appliances and farmers' tankers that need easily accessible places to fill. I think council and federated farmers need to work with the FENS to getting suitable fittings on farm tanks and irrigation hydrants, and also making irrigation ponds accessible for fire trucks before we close the stockwater system. The stockwater system allowed the subdivision and settlement of the plains for farming, as most of mid-Canterbury had no natural surface water, and over the last 140 years have been an integral part of the district's environment. I believe that for the council to simply stop supplying stockwater in 3 years is unfair and irresponsible. I suggest you should use the remaining term of the current consents to enable a managed retreat from supplying stockwater, working with farmers and irrigation schemes on alternative supplies, as you did in the area supplied from Pudding Hill Stream. Thoroughly investigating the stormwater impact, and working with FENS and federated farmers on firefighting alternatives. Until recently, I've been Federated Farmers Mid-Canterbury Arable Chair, and I'm still on the National Arable Executive. And although I had minimal input into the Fed's submission, prior to doing my own, I was very pleased to see that our submissions were very similar, and I fully support their recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Darryl. Questions from councillors. Councillor Wilson.
Morning, Darryl. This morning.
Thank you.
Good. Would you accept that there are different areas that may be closed at different times? You know, with the 3-year period, obviously the upper plains or the areas. How do you accept that that may be a way forward rather than just saying no to 3 and yes to...
Yes, yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking, is that there should be a managed retreat, and areas that whereas there's not much use and there's good alternative supplies can be closed, but it should use that time that you've got left on your consents to investigate that and work through it, and rather than just stopping, we're going to stop this date.
Another question, if I may. Yep. And it's to do with flooding and stormwater collection. Where would the floodwaters go? Do you accept that stockwaters don't follow traditional floodwater paths sometimes? The stockwwater, goes across it? Or...
Yeah. So I think that's why it needs to be thoroughly investigated, because if the stockwater system's closed down, you can't expect farmers to just leave the channels sitting there. And at the moment, I think I wrote in my submission that our experience with the floods down Washburn Creek is it's much easier to control a flood if you've got it in a confined channel. When it's just flooding across the middle of your paddocks and ripping up your crops, it's very difficult to do anything about it. If it's in a confined channel, you can then fix the places where it overflows, and it's a lot easier to manage.
Any further questions, councillors? If not, thank you, Darryl, for giving up your time and coming along.
Thank you.
So we are now going to have a break for a cup of tea. We'll be back in 10 minutes. And submitters. And our next person up is Donna.
Thank you. Oh, can I go this way? Does it matter if I take this seat?
You have whatever seat you like, Donna. Yeah, you just need to make sure the speakers are on. That's it.
Thank you. To my right, for those who do not know, is Anne Craig, and to my left, Edith Smith, and we are all here from the Ashburton Citizens Association. So firstly, thank you so much for the opportunity to submit. I will take our submission as read. And there were just a couple of learnings in the preparation of this document that I'll put a spotlight on. One was in regards to the water-based leisure and the fact that New Zealand has a high fatal drowning rate compared to other Western nations, such as Australia, Canada and the UK. And for the past 10 years, our rate has been 1.68 per 100,000 of population, and for 2023 it rose to 1.72. In comparison, Australia's per capita rate is 1.1 and Canada 1.3. So that then encouraged me to go and find out the cost of adult learn to swim classes and the availability. And it was a surprise to see that there are only classes conducted once a week on a Tuesday, 12 o'clock until 12:40, which is a cost of $12.50 for 40 minutes. However, anyone wanting to learn outside of that time is required to take private lessons ranging from $26.50 for 15 minutes to $47.50 for 30 minutes. So that's actually quite a high cost, and we encourage council to review and find a more affordable way for people to learn to swim. Then I'm just going to jump down to the Balmoral Hall question. Our committee were divided on this issue, and I'm sure that that may well reflect the wider community. Down to the Stockwater. While we were initially discussing supporting the closure, which was council's preferred option, the article that came out in the press on the 27th of April from Charlie Mitchell highlighted a number of issues with Stockwater. In fact, it was titled "A Lagoon, an Irrigation Scheme and a Giant Can of Worms." The article examines the court decision involving an irrigation scheme and has posed some serious questions about Canterbury's approach to improving water quality and may have national implications. We also talked about the importance of retaining stockwater races that have high biodiversity value. And right at the end, any other issues, I'd like to just put a spotlight on the toilets at the cemetery extension. It's been a topic that's been discussed quite frequently at the Citizens Association, and we'd like to see those happen sooner rather than later. And also the need for rubbish bins. And then the Ashburton Second Urban Bridge, and Anne has resurrected a sign that she has bought here a number of times before, that the Citizens Association members disagree with the current preferred location of the proposed Ashburton Second Urban Bridge. While it may have been marginally correct when it was first pitched back in the 1970s, and the then Ashburton Borough Council considered acquiring land from Bridge Street residents, the subsequent increase in traffic movements, introduction of HPMVs and recent closures of the Ashburton Bridge due to damage and cautionary measures raised significant concerns around the existing life of the current bridge. The Ashburton Bridge and State Highway 1 are key roading network assets, and the resilience of the network is firmly an NZTA, aka Waka Kotahi matter. If central government need to do major work to ensure the resilience of that network, including the Ashburton Bridge, it will be far more efficient to build one 4-lane bridge rather than two 2-lane bridges. In closing, I thank you for the opportunity to submit to the 24-34 long-term plan. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Questions from councillors. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Morning, ladies. My question is on the water-based leisure, and I know you said do them all. How would we do that? Like when? Would we stagger that? Would we do them all at once? And do you think the district can afford to do all of those?
So option 1, refurbishing the Tynwald pool. I think it is an important asset for the Tynwald domain and for the residents of Tynwald. I think it's important for the holiday park. It's well utilised, and it was in the Tynwald domain development plan. Create a new water play area for the domain. I put in my submission, I thought that had already been somewhat approved in the domain development plan that was adopted by council. I could go through all of these, but to answer your question, how do we do it and can we afford it all? You've recently been submitting on EA Network Centre 30-year plan, and it may well be that an outdoor pool at EA Networks is year 15, year 20. It doesn't all have to be done immediately, but the statistics of drownings is a really important message. The fact that Ministry of Education used to encourage learn to swim classes and provide facilities to do so, and now seem to have all but removed themselves from that equation, leaves a gap, and that gap is being evidenced in increased drowning numbers. Does that answer your question, Councillor McMillan?
Sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, ladies. Just a question on the talk about Charlie Mitchell's comments in the press, Donna. Is he a scientist or a opinion writer for the press?
I can speak for Charlie. He is a well-recognised researcher with his articles, and I think that some people might feel very sceptical because of their discomfort that they felt when they were reading that article.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, thank you, Donna, but you're going to stay there anyway.
I am, thank you. Thank you, ladies. Thank you.
And I welcome Donna from the Regent Theatre.
Regent Cinema.
Cinema, sorry.
It's okay. We've been trying to educate people for a long time. So thank you for the opportunity to submit. I'll take the submission as read and just advise a correction and some additional information. So the correction is on page 2. The last sentence in italics reads, we ask that the 30 kilometre zone be extended another couple of blocks up to and including Peter Street. And while that was our thinking back in October 22, which is where I extracted that information from that submission, I would now suggest up to and including Will Street would be more appropriate. On page 3, the last sentence relating to driver education and vehicles leaving commercial car parks. This morning I counted 15 driveways and access points on the block from Cass Street to East Street along Wills, and the most used, of course, is Woolworths North Complex, previously Countdown North. And just yesterday we had a customer who proudly walked from Ellington to the Regent Cinema to watch a movie, yet as she tried to pass the Woolworths North exit onto Wills, was forced to stop by vehicles when drivers behave as though they have the right of way. On page 4, at the start of the last paragraph, it reads, Regent Cinema do not support the closure of Victoria from Cameron to Cass, and a reduction of 17 car parks. That was estimated on an aerial Google map. This morning I actually went walking and discovered it's 21. So in truth it should read, Regent Cinema do not support the closure of Victoria Street from Cameron to Cass and a loss of 21 car parks. An additional observation is in recent weeks I've observed a mobility scooter that travels on the east side of Cass, so think in front of the Salvation Army store, from Peter to Wills, and there are raised yellow indicators pointing pedestrians from the Salvation Army to the Regent Cinema. Those yellow raised indicators normally also indicate a pedestrian crossing, and there is none in place. So I'm unsure if they should be removed or a pedestrian crossing installed. But that mobility scooter, because there is no crossing, then drives on the road along Cass Street from the Salvation Army to the Triangle Cafe. So while we are already an area of high accidents, this is just another obstacle. Talking to another regular mobility scooter driver, they travel on the south side of Victoria Street, from Chalmers Avenue to town, only to have limited vision at the intersection of Wills and Victoria, where the District Council gardens in front of Horrell Engineering are high and obstruct views for persons sitting in a mobility scooter. They then cross to the area in front of the Devon, and there's no direct route, as again ADC plantings are large and require pedestrians to detour. In regards to closing the street, the alfresco dining policy has been in place for nearly 10 years, and only 2 seem to have been successful, that being Cleaver's Corner and Kelly's Cafe, both of which are undercover and able to be heated. In a very recent development, overnight on Victoria Street, both eastbound and westbound, the road markings at the intersection of Cass and Victoria have changed from give way to stop signs. So well done, Council. This area has a very high number of pedestrians not using pedestrian crossings, and drivers are busy looking for on-road traffic, such as trucks, vans, cars, scooters, mobility scooters, bikes, as opposed to pedestrians. At the end of my submission, in the area of other comments, I added a comment around the resource consent that the cinema hold. The reason being, I understand at a recent event centre presentation, the issue of parking arose, and councillors asked why Regent Cinema car parks could not be used. That is, we are required under our resource consent to provide 20 car parks. And under their resource consent, the event centre are required to rent them to us. We would be happy to reduce or relinquish car parks as it is an ongoing costly exercise to meet the terms of our District Council resource consent requirements. To better understand the parking limitations in the area, I do encourage any elected members to witness for themselves some examples, perhaps while Les Miserables is on from the 17th to the 25th of May, or even on Friday the 21st of June when the Ashburton College Ball is on. Thank you very much for the opportunity to submit.
Thank you, Donna. Questions? Mayor Brown.
Thanks, Donna, for your submission. It asks about the parking limits on Will Street, which is currently 60 minutes, like them reviewed. To what?
My suggestion would be to 120 or 180.
Right, thank you. And they talk about the car parking that the cinema has to have because of the resource consent. Have you applied for a change of condition on the resource consent? What have you thought about that?
No, I have not applied for a change. And my thoughts, I would happily, I need to go back and discuss that with my business partner.
Because that would be up to you to do, not us, I think, if you want to change a condition on your consent.
Oh, I'm fully aware of that. However, it was an opportunity to educate because the question seems to have been raised here to our landlord, being the event centre, about why not use the cinema car parks. Okay. So it was an opportunity to educate, but happy, I'll go back and discuss with my business partner or tell my husband, whichever way you want to take it.
Whichever you choose.
I'm sure it'll happen then. No further questions? Thank you, Donna, for coming along and submitting twice. Well done. Thank you. Okay. Edith Smith is our next presenter. Welcome, Edith. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Just to introduce myself, for those that don't know me, I've been an Ashburtonian for over 60 years and a Forest and Bird member for much of that time. I've been involved with the development of the Ashburton River Management Plan since the 1990s, a small group of people advocating for the river and a loud voice of people that were going to be abstracting and benefiting in a pecuniary way from the water in the river. I was actually on the Canterbury Water Management Strategy Steering Group, and again, there were two other people on the group in particular with an alternative view. And as we saw once John Key's government changed the dynamics of the steering group, we've got an outcome that we're actually living with now. And but that's just my little introduction. I want to talk about water races to begin with. And I have submitted or written to the council regarding the Pudding Hill water race. I've got a number of hats here. The Citizens Association, I'm also involved with the Ashburton Heritage Historic Places. And thus it came a combination of looking at a Pudding Hill water race, looking at the water and thinking about the history and the potential to lose it. And so I referred in my original letter to the council with regards to the original water races. They were built in the 1880s. The water races were then as important to Ashburton as the RDR is now. And look how we celebrate the RDR. And what am I hearing today? People just desperately wanting to remove something that's been a vital part of Ashburton's history, these water races. And getting back to Pudding Hill, I accept after having a number of conversations and understanding the dynamics of keeping the water race open at Pudding Hill, that there is potential to actually retain that concrete waterways and the infrastructure associated with it as a heritage, a historic place that could be of interest to visitors, and if it's promoted well with panels describing how that water race, and even a map of the water race races throughout mid-Canterbury. I mean, it was a remarkable achievement. Even the Harris Reserve, the water race there that we're having a conversation about, that Arthur Harris didn't have water races on his property, but he had an idea. So he had a dig around with a shovel, basically, and then got a grader driver to dig the ditch for him, the water race. So it's another little side of history, seeing we're developing a dryland site with a water race. But just an aside, but yes, I see the idea of information panels, parking area, easy to do up that road to where the intake is, and making it another interesting place to visit, for visitors to visit. That would be all you would need to do would to be keep the water race, the concrete water race, clear of weeds, and we're very good at doing that with our manicured landscape here, and a parking area for people to turn around, and we're doing really good work, Christian and Donna from ECAN, on the upper reaches of the Pudding Hill streams, so they sort of sit side by side, as I can see. The other remaining water races, and I'm not familiar with them all, I have to say, but I am familiar with the map. They hold significant value, whether they're spring-fed or flowing from other natural sources, and the zone and the district council processes have not protected some of them, and in the past, but I believe that our newly released biodiversity strategy should. The biodiversity and ecosystems that are associated with our water races are as relevant as the terrestrial. To ensure there's no further loss of water race ecosystems and species, and that's mussels and kura and bullies and I've been hearing about lampreys in South Canterbury. Who knows, if we give them a chance, what we might have here. I did mention in my submission that a couple of closures took place as we removed our water races. One was on Racecourse Road, and there they had kura and a whole suite of bully species. And the decision had been made because some people didn't want a water race, but this water race is an ecosystem. These water races are ecosystems. And the other one, where we don't see, some of you that have water races, we don't see freshwater mussels every day of the week, but to see that area filled in was really disappointing, and that was Lismore Way. So I would like to refer to I would like the District Council actually to revisit how they value water races, because yes, I agree that some are an inconvenience. We know that some are an important part of flood drainage and managing floods, and but others we know also are highly ecologically important. So Colin Merck, who's a very well-known scientist associated with Lincoln and Canterbury universities, he identifies the water races as the most visible examples of indigenous nature on the plains. And in reality, when you look at that, look at the water races and think about the development surrounding our landscape, they are just last vestiges. They have been and are still very characteristic and iconic feature of the Canterbury Plains.
Just conscious of time, Edith, so if you can just wrap up.
Can I hurry through?
Yep.
I was thinking that Dan was speaking for a long time. I didn't know my page would. Anyway, okay. The the water race discussion leads to the Ashburton River. And walking in the river, in the November bird survey, which I've done for many years, the slime on the stones at 12 cubics, which should have been flowing freely, which was flowing freely, made a very difficult experience, even for the younger people that were working with me, and even for a farmer from up country who does bird surveying, who's fit and able. I had not experienced it quite like that so early in the season. I mean, we do get a bit of slime later in the summer. Anyway, the scientists did tell me that it was caused by a phosphorus seep from groundwater that cannot be dealt with. It's not a very good indictment for our industry that can produce that to really probably the main ecological feature, or should be, what should be, in Ashburton, the Ashburton River. Anyway, John Waugh, he says that there must be alternative ways of ensuring that agreed agreed flows in the Ashburton Hickory are met. And this could include water race flows to the river where possible, rather than to the ground, which is what's been happening. There's a whole lot of little mares dotted all around the countryside as the water races just returned to the ground. So while the benefit of the new minimum flows of 6 cubic low flow has been insufficient to keep the mouth open, and that was the big, long, hard argument that 6 cubics would keep the mouth open. It was closed for about 3 months this year. John did say through his research that there were actual higher flows in the river with the 6 cubics, with the mostly 6 cubics, the 6 cubic level, and compared with the previous drought or the history of drought periods. So, like, while you think that the river was sort of going dry and there wasn't much in it, there has been advantage to the river. But I'd also like to be, Forest and Bird would also like to be assured that the optimum flow of 10 cubics, as agreed with after decades of discussion, will be met in 2033, when I'm understanding that there's a little bit of a review on the Ashburton River. And just a quick Harris Reserve. We appreciate the support that we receive from the District Council. And latterly we've received immediate steps funds from ECAN, $4,000 per year for 5 years, which is concluding this year. And while these reserves are currently adequate to continue planting and management, but if we had an emergency, we would be looking for extra funding, like a windblown or other shelter belt damage or fencing and that sort of thing. And currently Coxfoot is a major concern, and we're really looking at stepping outside our own volunteers to manage it.
Thank you, Edith. I think we're running out of time.
Okay.
Edith. So we'll take a quick question from Councillor Wilson.
Good morning. I've written it down, so I'll read it. Would you accept that there may have to be some closures and the loss of biodiversity to allow the transition of other water races to environmental waterways, if you understand what I mean? So we lose some, but we gain some better ones.
Yes.
Would you allow that to?
I would agree with that. I accept that.
And the last question is, would you be willing to work with council to help that transition happen, Forest and Bird?
Yes, certainly.
Councillor Nicol.
Thank you. Edith, very informative, thank you. Just wondering, there was no mention of the payments of the ratepayers, farmers that have to contribute largely financially towards these water races. What are your thoughts on that?
I understand that it seems quite expensive when people aren't utilising it, but what cost is our ecosystems? We have to think about that.
I was just wondering what your thoughts are on those individuals having to fork out of their own funds.
Well,
to pay for that
as the question was about somebody being a scientist, I'm not an accountant. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Edith, for your presentation. Next person, Ted Wood. Welcome, Ted. The floor is yours.
Thank Mr. Chairman, Worship the Mayor, councillors. I've listened to the Minister of Local Government who said that councils should concentrate on the works they have to do and the works they might like to do should come after. And so I've got a few suggestions to make. Must do work, cap it at this year's figure and allow for inflation at the rate of about 4%, which is what we're told on the public media will be the rate of inflation this year. And the nice to do work, cap at this year's figure and make no allowance for inflation. For monies given to Network Stadium and the Trust Events Centre, I suggest you cap at this year's figure, make no allowance for inflation, and if they're not happy with their revenue, ask them to increase their prices. Groups coming to council for handouts, cap at this year's figure, make no allowance for inflation, but I would like to see a rotary system involved so that other worthy organisations get a term. And cap the present number of council employees. Roading. As I observe roading, there doesn't seem to be any critical stage planning. If this is typical of the roading program generally, because I don't see much of it, then there is a significant wastage of money. I saw no council supervision on the two contracts I was observing over a 3-week period, and but I assume this was done. And that finishes my explanation, 5-minute explanation of my submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
If I know that people will complain about the various things, but you just have to remind you what you're telling all your ratepayers. These are the rates we're striking, deal with it.
Thank you, Ted. Any questions? We have no... Oh, sorry.
I've got one here.
Yep.
Morning, Ted. I see on your submission that you have recommended that we don't sell the Balmoral Hall site. What do you think we should spend around about 1.3 million to fix up the hall?
Well, I think if you spent the 1.34 million, what dollars is it, to do up the Balmoral Hall, you will have to charge a rent of approximately $100,000 a year. And I don't think those organisations that use the Balmoral Hall will be able to cope with that. At present, you're only getting 25% of the expenses you spent this year in rent on the hall. And, I'm very sad about that because my family in the female side used the Balmoral Hall, and but I can't see any future for the Balmoral Hall the way it's been laid out in one of the 5 things to decide on.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted. That's no further questions, so many thanks for coming along.
Thank you.
Our next submitter is Gerard Rushton. Morning, Gerard.
Good morning. Morning, Mr Mayor, councillors. Thank you for your time today. My submission in the written submission was quite brief. I took the opportunity to come and speak instead. I'll start with the water races. I submitted to close the water races. I don't see them fit for purpose anymore. I've lived at Anima all my life. I've seen the deterioration in water quality, which started far beyond the dairy boom that everyone seems to blame for the degradation of water quality. As being one of the users at the top of the system, probably for the last 30 years, it hasn't been suitable to drink out of, whereas before that, in my younger days, you thought nothing of actually going and having a drink out of the race. I've been through the process of race closure, so I'm pretty familiar with that, albeit disappointed with the process and quite happy to talk offline with any councillors over that. I have 110 hectares and it costs me around between $3,000 and $4,000 a year for the privilege of having your races run across my property to serve people who don't want to pay the full cost of having that privilege. I am concerned that some people are promoting the fact that the closure of the water races will see a problem with drainage. Let's decide whether the water races are stock water or drainage. That then changes the liability of who actually cleans them and who actually looks after them. As to the change in the rating system, I actually think you probably need to look at it in another way. I believe that it'd be better to have likes of myself who doesn't want the race to pay a minimal charge, and the people that do want the race pay the cost of maintaining that system, and I think that would sort out your problem reasonably quickly. I mean, it's something I would throw at the council rather than just raise the minimum amount for those people who cause me, that might have 10 hectares that cause me to spend $4,000 a year, for them to have that privilege. So that's basically all I've got on the water races. I now get on to the EA Network Centre submission. I, of course, am Chairman of Mid-Canterbury Rugby. I'm speaking not on behalf of the rugby today, but I do portray some of their opinions. I think that we will be submitting on the longer term plan next week. The comments I make may actually seem to be more relevant to the long term plan, but I believe that both this plan and the 35-year-old plan need to be looked at in tandem, because I think that some decisions made in this early decision-making process might preclude the other things being developed in the long-term plan. So I really think that we've got to look at both of them in tandem. I indicated my support for the proposal to extend the EA Centre, which might have surprised some of you. And perhaps there's a couple of reasons I did that. One was probably to get in the room. Because I believe that I support it because it actually needs to be looked at with in the context of fulfilling what the initial plan was for that EA Centre to actually develop the whole centre. So that was one of the reasons. Also, I note that in building that centre, council set a precedent where they built facilities for sports, with those sports contributing no capital content to the building of those. So that's probably another reason that I supported the extension of the EA Centre, because obviously that precedent is going to be set again, where you're not requiring the participating sports to contribute any capital. Given the context that we have been told time and time again by the council that if rugby want development of EA Centre, we and the community have to come up with 50% of the money. So I'm reasonably happy that council have changed their tune on that, and look forward to the fact that the development of the EA Centre will be built under the same financial requirements. And I think that this will actually, there's a lot of other sports involved, that not only rugby. So I really think that the council need to spend money now, as we've seen a lot of open spaces drop from our plan. So we need to make sure that we actually look after the open space sports as well as those that play sport indoors. Yeah, but as I say, we've got to be equitable. And I also supported it because I believe that Mid-Canterbury is a very vibrant area, and we actually, our community actually deserves a facility that is suitable for the size and the need of the community. So, yeah, look, we are very fortunate in Mid-Canterbury as to how insulated we are to a lot of economics, and I think that the community actually deserves a facility that is being proposed. Now move on to the report. Now this is the report, my favourite report. I've met with Richard from the EA Centre about it. I've met with the CEO and the Mayor concerning the report. I did tell them when I actually met with them that I didn't print it off because I didn't think it was worth the paper it was written on, and Mayor, I still haven't printed it off. I got this off Tanya yesterday, so she was one that wasted her paper. Look, I've talked to the Mayor and the CEO and Richard about the concerns around the validity of this and accuracy of this report, and they accepted our concerns. And I'm not sure whether, and we were assured that this report wouldn't be taken as an integral part of the decision-making process. But now, during this council consultation process, I hear even the Mayor on the radio saying that we need to develop the EA Centre because we've got a report that says it's needed. We go to the long-term plan meetings that you councillors have all participated in, and we hear that we need to build a bigger EA Centre because we've got a report that says we need to. So for those of you that don't know my concerns on the report, I could spend my full 10 minutes on it if you like. I'm happy to take it offline, but basically it's a report that outlines most of the sports in the county, not all. Some of them are missed out. There's one that you can sort of sit and look at the EA Centre with being frisbee golf that's actually missed out, but there's hundreds of people play that. But we dedicate a page to the 30 pickleball players. So to me, I mean, there's two words that come to mind with this report, and that's predetermined outcome. So it compiles the list of all the sports in Mid-Canterbury. It takes the average usage figures from Sport New Zealand and applies them to the Mid-Canterbury area and comes up with a report on how sport is looking in Mid-Canterbury. So to give you some indications, just some quick indications on that says that there's 3,300 people in the athletics club in Ashburton. We've got 2,500 people playing rugby in Mid-Canterbury, which is the biggest sport. I'm pretty sure there's not 3,300 people playing athletics. I can give you several examples of that. Some of the things that it is accurate on is the swimming numbers, the learn to swim numbers, which of course we know are all subsidised and probably would drop off if that subsidy went. And you know, I'm really surprised that the council have adopted this report. I'm really surprised that after notifying the council and that when it was in draft form that they've adopted it and they've actually paid for it, and I'd like to know how much they've actually paid for it, because I'm sure that the ratepayers would be really concerned. So the rugby side of it, I mean, and what I really want to actually talk about here is having a development of that EA Centre which is equitable. So I mean, rugby, as you know, we've had our issues at the AMP and still have it ongoing with conflict with horses and usage. AMP have been to the council asking money. We're turned down. We're offered a loan. So you know, here we've got a sport which got 2,500 people, the biggest sport in Mid-Canterbury, but the council won't actually help them out. But we've got these other sports that they're prepared to actually fund a whole new building for. So is that equitable? That's where I'm really concerned about.
I'm enjoying your presentation, Jared, but we're time-wise, we're getting if you want any questions.
Oh yeah, and look, there's equity, you know, throughout the regions too. I mean, if you look at regions like Ellesmere, the development that have gone on there, as I said, Mid-Canterbury is an affluent area. We just need to be like our neighbours. Rugby, I see what happens equitable across the nation. We're the only heartland union that doesn't have a council-provided facility. The ranges from other unions are, the bottom probably is Poverty Bay pays $1 a rent for their grounds, stands and club rooms from the council. Horowhenua Kapiti have a turf-based facility which is owned by a council-based trust, which they pay $15,000 a year to use it. We're paying about $80,000 at the moment to provide rugby at the showgrounds. Even have to pay the council to mow our grounds. So there's a lot of other points that I could make. I mean, we look at what's happening in South Canterbury as well. We only need to look at Hagley Park, the peppercorn rent that gets paid up there. So that's what we need to make sure that any decision we make around the EA Centre is equitable across all sports. And I'm not only talking about rugby, I'm talking about all the sports. I mean, we've just got to give everyone the same deal, okay? And I know what you'll say to me. You'll say, well, if you want all this stuff, Jed, no problem at all, we'll just put the rates up, you know? But as I said, Mid-Canterbury is an affluent area. And I have a couple of questions. I mean, where did the $20 million go that Shane Jones gave us to build this building? I mean, has that been just used in the consolidated fund? But wouldn't that have been a great thing for the council, or legacy for the council to leave, saying we've earmarked that fund to develop a facility at the EA Centre which will see our community enjoy for generations to come. But I fear that money's gone. I'd like to know where it's gone. Perhaps some of the councillors could ask where it has gone. Also, you know, where was all the money gone from all the subdivisions in Canterbury recently around the contribution that the developers have made? There's been hundreds and hundreds of sections in Mid-Canterbury. And I know that you'll say, when I look at Ellesmere, you know, you've got all those, there's half a dozen clubs in Ellesmere that have had grounds built. And you'll say that's money from people coming out of Christchurch. But we've had the same thing in Ashburton. When was the last big project that Ashburton District Council did on an open playing surface? When was it? You know? So
Are we about there, Gerard, are we?
Yep. Just finished. So if you have got any questions, I'm more than happy. But if you've got any questions offline, I'm more than happy to take it.
Okay, questions from Councillor Wilson.
Jed, I'm interested in the relationship between, because we have some very strong rugby clubs who've got wonderful grounds, obviously Southern, Methven, Rakaia redeveloping. Will that relationship change if we you had a really nice ground in town? Would the rugby be expected to play there, and would that detract from some of those other grounds? Because the relationship, at the moment, everybody wants to play it on their wonderful grounds, but would you force them to play in there? How would that
no, it's not actually possible, Richard, because there's one thing, we need gender neutral facilities, which something at the EA Centre would actually provide. And B, that those, we don't want to get in the same situation as netball, where they've just closed down all the regional netball courts because they're all practicing at the EA Centre now. We still need those training facilities because obviously, I mean, I don't know, I'd have to ask Tony how many teams we've got. We can't all have them practicing on one ground at one time. Everyone wants to practice Tuesdays, Thursdays or whatever. But also, we need that ability to retain young people to have a good sporting facility which is lit, so that we can offer young people their weekends back and offer them to play rugby during the week.
Yeah, Brown.
Thanks for your submission, Jed. Whereabouts do you get your stock water from now?
A well.
You got a well up there? Yep. Great. And the second question is around if rugby was to move to the EA Network Centre to be set up there, you're set up at the showgrounds now. What would happen to that facility if you left?
Well, probably the same thing if we stay there, Mayor, because, I mean, at the moment, we've got a situation where the AMP Association, if it wasn't for grants, would be losing sort of $35,000 a year, which is not sustainable for very long. So that leaves us in a very tricky situation because we need to invest funds in a facility, but we need to have the confidence that investment will be there for longer term, and that's why we were hoping there would be some support around that. But yeah, we need a premium facility, as I said. Probably the important thing is that gender neutral facility and the lighting to enable games to be played.
Time's against us, Lane, so quick question.
Jared, you talked about the growth in rugby. Is it in the youth, or is it in the adults, or is it all over?
Well, that's one thing that report says, that Mid Canterbury is 0.1% behind the national average of 2% participation. Mid Canterbury is, for the last 10 years, as long as I've been chairman, been around 8% participation, and we are second highest in the country. Our growth in the last 10 years has normally been about 10% every year. Last year was 23% growth, okay? 12.5%, it's not all women, 12.5% of that was teenage boys, okay? So we've had a growth in retention in teenage boys. We are turning that curve, we're turning it really well. We're probably one of the few unions in New Zealand that are, but we have had growth. We've got 3 or 4 extra teams this year in that high, not in teenage, but well, the lower teenage grade. So, yeah, there is growth there, and it's not all women.
I know, but it's basically in youth, the younger ones.
Okay. Yep. While we see our senior teams decline to 4, but we have got a really strong, and our 16s, 18s are stronger now than they have been for a number of years.
Thank you.
A lot of work, a lot of money.
Councillor Ellis, very quick question.
Very quickly then, Jed. Would you entertain the idea of some sort of partnership agreement with council in developing that land down there for use? I know you talked it's not equitable to what we're looking at there, but
yeah, and that's probably one of the frustrations. I mean, we're probably the only sport in Mid Canterbury that have concentrated on building a balance sheet to ensure we've got a future, and that's probably to our detriment because obviously the sports that haven't concentrated to strengthen their balance sheet to ensure their future just get looked after by the council. We'll have to fight on our own.
Excellent. Thank you, Jed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next presenter is Gillian. Light up Methven. Morning, Gillian. Nice to see you again.
Morning. Kia ora tātou.
Sorry. 684.
Thanks for the opportunity. There are just 3 points that I'd like to make to give you some context around particularly the focus group discussions and the feedback that we got from the community. Point 1 is that the community see the lighting project as a need, not just a nice to have. We acknowledge the challenge that council has to balance all the requests for very worthy projects and ideas against the management of the rates increases. And we're all very conscious of that. Also, you need to prioritise the needs over the nice to have, a point that was made just 2 speakers back. We respectfully submit that the lighting project in Methven is much, much more than just a nice to have. And this came back very clearly in the feedback discussions that we had. The town centre in the evening, I don't know if you've been sort of as dusk is coming into the town centre in Methven, but it's drab, it's dull, it's uninviting, and there are some sections of it that some people commented that they don't feel safe there. So it is seen as a need for 2 reasons, and this came through from sort of 2 different aspects of the feedback group. One was the lost opportunity that Methven Village centre in winter should be an attractive, vibrant magnet for visitors, skiers who come down the mountain and don't just go straight back to Christchurch, but come in. So that particular point was made very strongly by the business groups, the tourist operators, the hospitality sector, as you would expect. And the second thing that came through when we started having the discussions was around the well-being of the residents. And this came particularly from the people who live in the town centre and on the fringes of it, from the farming community, and from the youth. I had two groups with discussions with school groups, which were really interesting. And one of the significant factors for well-being, as I'm sure you're aware, is feeling good about the place that you live in. I have to commend the work that's been done in Ashburton with the streetscaping and the festive lighting. It looks stunning. It's really transformed Ashburton. And there's a sense that Methven should be attractive, inviting, safe, sense of pride for the people who live there. The voice came through. Now, this is not just about skiers. This is not just about being an exciting winter town to come to, although it should be that. It is about having a sense of pride and safety and well-being in the town that you're in, and it's not. Point number 2 is that we need to plan ahead and budget for the Methven 150 celebration. And this is only 5 years away now, 2029. We want to be able to celebrate our history, showcase Methven, have it as looking absolutely amazing at the time of our 150th. Not just for a few days for a celebration. It's very easy to bring in some lights and light up a place for a few days. I'm talking about a legacy of lights. That would be an investment as a legacy that would continue beyond just the celebration. In the original business case that was put through in July last year, which was before these focus groups and discussions, it was done with the help of the economic development team, so that it did have quite a strong focus on the business aspect of it. It was also 100,000 more expensive than what I'm proposing in the revised one. So we've redone the business plan in the light of the feedback that we got, in the light of the Methven 150-year celebration, done it in stages and reduced it down to do it as a partnership. And it was very clear in the feedback that people were willing to see this as a partnership. And so that's point number 3, my last point, is that we cannot do this by ourselves. It's absolutely worth doing, but we can't do it just for a local community group. It's been tried and it failed. If it's going to be done, businesses said, particularly the business groups, who said, we want to be part of this. This is really exciting, but we're not going to put money into doing this if it's just going to all fall apart like it did last time. The lighting plan needs to sit for its sustainability as a project, not just a short-term project, but to sit with the council. It needs to be owned by the council in partnership. So we're not just asking for some money for us to go away and make it happen. We're saying we want this to be sustainable. We want this as a legacy, an ongoing proposal, in two parts in particular, getting started straight away and then building for the 150th. I have to say, when I saw in the long-term budget the delivering on your strategic intentions, I think it was point number 6, I saw $98,400 allocated for festive lighting, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. The year before our 150th, sitting right there. So I looked a little more closely, and I think it was for Ashburton. So I would submit to you that the Methven lighting project belongs in the long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. Do you have any indication of the level of financial support from your supporters that you talk about, like from the wider community as you move on? Have people indicated, obviously they've indicated support, but have they indicated financial support at this stage?
The businesses have indicated support for doing their businesses, which makes sense. Yep. There is support from other businesses that are willing, they don't have the direct benefit, places more like perhaps, ski time or some of those accommodation places. And they want the town to be an attractive place to come to. There's sponsorships are always a possibility. Having a particular lighting statue that might highlight some particular aspect of the history of Methven and getting groups particularly behind that. There's not a dollar sum on that.
Okay, that's cool.
So we've just indicated what we would need from council as an absolute baseline just to get the thing started, really. The school group said that they were very happy to help. They're very, very good at fundraising. They do it all the time. So I'm not sure that a cake stall is going to do it, but...
Councillor Hooper.
Thank you. Hi, Gillian. Just having a look at your submission and strongly supported ideas, lighting walkway to a Puki Pools. Whereabouts is that walkway? Is that along that main stretch of road? And do many people walk the walkway in the evenings?
Yes, you're right. It's it's between the town down by the group of trees.
The race course.
Yes, there didn't used to be a walkway there at all, but there now is, and there's some feeling. But as I understand it, there are plans for lighting on the road there to be done to enhance it anyway. That was feedback from people saying, wouldn't it be nice to have pretty fairy lights down there to walk and make it a lovely place to walk. So we've not included that for the reason that we're talking about really lighting up the town centre. There were lots of other ideas for things. Fairy lights around the school grounds, that was very popular too, but that didn't make the cut either.
Councillor.
Thank you. Morning, Gillian. Just looking at your submission, and you've said that the lighting would be under lighting, not the fairy lights in the trees.
Yes.
Is that purely because it's cheaper?
Absolutely cost effective. It does look lovely if you have a bit of underlighting and some fairy lights, and we actually have fairy lights, but I think that were purchased between, I think it was council and community. But it's the cost of the arborist, the cost of setting all that up. So we just went for the simpler, let's get something done, something effective, and we could look at something different later. But I think those lights that have been purchased could be used elsewhere around the business community.
Councillor Wilson.
Morning. I know you're a lighting fan. Has there been any discussion around the dark sky thing? Because obviously, that's the yin and yang of it all.
Absolutely, and that was one of the first people when we went sort of public in the local Snowfed magazine was cornered, is probably the word, by somebody who was very passionate about the Dark Sky project, which I support too. I was a night sky watcher. I did a course at university on how to read the night sky. We went just out of Mayfield to an absolutely ideal place for that. For those who are absolutely passionate, that is the place to go. There are lights now that you can have that are quite effective at minimising. There's always going to be lighting in the village centre. I mean, there has to be for safety. We're not anticipating that there'll be a huge increase. If you buy the right sort of lighting, direct them correctly. I think there were, other than that one person, I think there were maybe 2 or 3 other respondents who indicated that we need to be careful about it. Not saying we shouldn't do it at all, but...
Yeah, Brown.
Yeah, thanks for your submission. You say it's a need, not a nice to have. Methven has street lights now, so why is this a need and not a nice to have?
There are areas where there are parts around the mall where you walk around where there definitely needs to be more lighting of some sort. But the feel that it's not a place that the residents feel is a place that you can be proud of. And I think that's a need, not just a nice to have. I think you should be living in an environment where you feel it's a nice place to be, as well as the obvious economic benefits from it.
Thank you. No further questions? Thank you, Gillian, for coming along and presenting. Well done. Thank you. The next submitter is Richard Bruce.
Hi councillors, I'm very pleased to meet you,
Page
and from what I've
19.
heard today, and I don't hear much, I must apologise, I'm very deaf, so this is going to be somewhat of a one-way effort, and you'll have a problem stopping me. I have a fairly good authority here, and I'm prepared to use it. Now, I would like to share a little bit with you. Don't waste too much time on this bit of paper until it comes time. Share it now, please. What's the big word of it? Now, please say it with you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
He didn't email us the policy.
It's on the Stella, but I'll send it by email. I'll put it by email.
Now, I know it's getting on to lunchtime, but please bear with me. It took me quite a bit to be here. Initially, I'd like to say that I think the council as a whole are falling down a bit, more than a bit in places, on their main task for being, namely roads, bridges and water. Now, I've heard a little bit about water here today, specifically the water races. Now, I'm somewhat of a lateral thinker. Those that know me will confirm that. And I often see other opportunities. Now, we're here in this wonderful building today named Heaney Parker. Hands up anyone who knows how that came about.
We all do.
Are you aware that it was George Rowntree? Good. Because the legend of Heaney Parker was completely forgotten by Arawanua, Kaiapoi, but not two old ladies at Little River. And they died some months after George spoke with them, and they remembered this myth, which was almost totally forgotten and would have been but for George. And up at Alfred Forest, the hoodoo tree, that was the name given to it. And you wonder why I've got this thing? Well, as a kid I was called Tahunga because I know a lot about Maori culture. I know a lot more now, and there's an awful lot of lies being put about now. But an old man in Timaru, I was on the road for 28 years selling a wire strainer with my dad. I was visiting a friend of mine, and this old Maori guy came in and tried to sell this taiha. And I said to him that the chap wasn't buying, incidentally, he was a furniture restorer. He later took his own life. We'll come to that later. And this old guy, I spoke to him because I know a lot about the culture, and I said, why are you selling it? He says, my son is an alcoholic. I have about 3 months to live, and I am getting money together to give to my daughter to get her schooling. And we parted company. I gave him quite a lot of money for it, because in those times I was in business. And then he said, where do you come from? Do you come from Geraldine? I said, I was born there, but I've been at Staveley for most of my life. And he said, I shore sheep for your father for 3 years running. And I remember you. And when he gave me this gadget, which I know a lot about, he said, I said to him, what will happen when I'm going to pass it on? He said, I believe you'll know, and I do. Now that little bit of history I thought I'd share with you, because I think that a lot of lies have been told in our culture at the moment. We should go back to real history. So we'll leave that alone. Now, I come from Staveley, and one of my hobbies in the last 30 years has been brain function. And I'll guarantee you there's nobody here that can tell me how you think. Well, it's been known for quite a few years. We're very slow to catch up on things. How many here today know that Israel is now defending itself with a ray system, a laser ray, with enormous efficiency, called Iron Beam? It's been in operation for some months. So keeping up with technology is a real problem, but at the same time, we need to keep the stuff and maintain. Now, the water races are obviously past their use by date, but they have a useful function for conservation, the mudfish and so on. And I wonder if how many crayfish are in them now, if that's an indication of pollution. Maybe, maybe not. But civil defence over the whole of New Zealand is not in good condition. One of the best things we could do with retaining a few of the water races is have them fill up points for monsoon buckets. Up in North Canterbury, this was proven to be a very good asset. So I would leave you the idea that instead of getting rid of everything at once, maybe we can retain a bit of the good stuff and modify it a bit so it applies to today. Monsoon buckets are one of the only ways to fight fires today. Incidentally, the fitting of fire connections to the wells of Mid-Canterbury that our Federated Farmers man has achieved, I suggested that to him more than a decade ago, 15 years ago. But it's gone ahead and it's taken all those years. We've now got the facility to tap into wells for firefighting. And I've fought fires, I assure you, and we're going to see some big ones with the regrowth of the high country. Trying to move on. Now, we've just seen the two major bridges, the rail bridge at Rangitata, where I used to gather seagull eggs just below there when I was a kid. Brother-in-law had a farm on Rangitata Island. And I remember that bridge very well, because we used to go up there, there were some old trains dumped there to keep the water away. And we've had the Ashburton Bridge nearly go out. Now maybe we'll get a new bridge and maybe we don't, but we need to maintain that we've got, the one we've got. For a short period, about 11 months of my life, I worked with a pile driver and we drove piles for the hydro lines. I learned how to appreciate tea with gear oil in it. And if we put in protective piles upstream, we'll stop the scour effect and maybe be able to look after our bridges. We did that in several cases way back there, in the early 1950s. And on the west coast, this was at that time quite a common thing to safeguard your piles. Now, the maintenance of our braided rivers is largely up to ECAN, which is stuffed with very bright people, maybe, but short on experience. And so we have a build-up of shingle, which is quite threatening the welfare of Ashburton. Just go up to the Winchmore crossing up there by the Winchmore Hall and drive in there on a Sunday, and you'll see the build-up of shingle there. And here in Ashburton, we used to have shingle being extracted from the bridges to actually spread the flow. And they had D8s working at Rangitata Island when I was a child every couple of years to make sure that happened. So, while I sound critical, I'm trying to contribute. And as an old and garrulous person, this applies to me. I ran across something the other day. Smart people without wisdom are fools. I think that's a very telling comment. I can apply it to my life no end. Getting wisdom has always been a problem. Now, hammering on at what I'm trying to tell you, the hall with the sprung floor needs maintenance. It's a wooden building, so it will need maintenance. But how many of you know much about the brain and about the way activities happen and the fact that dance and movement is the most effective way of combating mental illness? And if any of you want to take the time to look at your wonderful computers, I'm very impressed how many of you are working them, by the way. I've struggled for years. Look up shuffle dancing, and you'll see a simple exercise that could be taught to children that's miles ahead of the mindfulness rubbish, which is very pathetic. It's okay, but it's only the tip of an iceberg. And look at a person shuffle dancing and ask how they could be depressed when they've done that. Very simple things. I'm very, very keen on some of this brain stuff, which is thoroughly researched. And while I'm banging on about my boring hobby, how often do people run out of a counsellor's office shouting, "I'm cured"? Well, there are about 40 or 50 methods, modalities, and nobody's done the experiment to find out which ones work the best and why. So we'll leave that alone. Everything is composed of two parts, the big picture and the detail. I want to give you some detail. Now, the bridges of the county are not inspected very often. In fact, it's only the major ones, I think, that are maintained very well. Up at Staveley, where I come from, in the 1960s, a new road was driven through, and Lambie's Road was renamed Rutherford's Road and Cox's Road. And two very good bridges were put in there. And Mount Somers is a storm centre for the Ashburton County, and some extraordinary things happen. In my over 50 years up there, I can talk for a long time about the extraordinary storms that we've seen and the extraordinary results. Now, the results that we're worried about are rain. Now, some years ago, I did a presentation to the council showing them a whole lot of pictures, photographs from some of the things that had happened up there, because I was concerned about one particular part. Now, I'm trying to make an example of this, not because it is a hobby of mine, but this is what I think is happening around the county, because we're missing out on the detail. Now, the detail on Rutherford's Road, where the irrigation ditch, and if you look at that big piece of paper, you'll see the diversion race actually goes under a couple of streams that meet just before the siphon. To make it even more interesting, there's a roadway there as well. Back in the 50s when I was a kid, that roadway was cut every year, and sometimes 4 or 5 times a year. And there was a great gut next door to it. And so in the 60s, when a major reorganisation of the roads went through, they decided to cut out one bridge and build 2 more and cut a road to give spare access to Mount Somers if the main road was cut, which was a very good idea. At the point that I'm talking about, which is on that sheet of paper I've given you, they put in a great bridge. And it's lasted until 3 months ago. And it's lasted because it was big enough. Unfortunately, in the intervening 40 or 50 years, the stream, called Cave Stream, coming from Petrified Gully, that used to go straight across that siphon, has turned at a double right angle because of the growth of willow trees and not of maintenance. And it goes straight for the road. And on that bit of paper you'll see several parts mapped in red. And that's where something has happened. Now, not only did Cave Stream in high flood, which is only a very short time, huge amount of water, start to wash away the fill of the road, but it also turned onto the main delivery of Stevenson Stream and turned it slightly so that it attacked the irrigation ditch. Now, I told you guys, or not you chaps, possibly some years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, up there when I gave the presentation, this was going to happen. It did. It also took out the bloody bridge. First time in 40 or 50 years. And it took it out because the neglect, the heap of shingle deposited there that I told you folks about some years ago, and actually featured in the Courier, believe it or not, with my royal self. I didn't know they took the photograph. That heap of shingle is still there. The council have fixed the bridge, but the next flush we get, it'll do it again.
Richard, we're running out of time, so we only have 10 minutes per presentation.
I'll wrap it up
so
then.
we're there.
I can do this. I have, incidentally, if anyone wants to, I've got pictures there on the iPad of some of this stuff. Now, we need the bridges to be inspected every year, preferably with a water blaster, because on Cox's Road the build-up was so much that water coming off the paddocks actually went across the bridge like a flume. Extraordinary. All with lack of follow-up maintenance and the little bits that are needed. At the point where I'm telling you, if you look carefully at that map, which I'm sorry I can't spend the time, all they need to do is put Harmer's D8 in for half an afternoon and they'd solved the problem. This problem has built up over 40 years. Cave Stream needs to go straight ahead. Incidentally, the ditch, the irrigation siphon was damaged in this recent flood. First time ever, and it's going to happen again. So look, thank you for your time, and I have taken the time to do some pictures of the bridges, and if they don't get cleaned every year or two, they build up under the burn. We've got great bridges. Now, up at the twin bridge at Pudding Hill, I took a drive to Rakaya when the last big flood was on with my iPad, and what do you know, at the twin bridges, the roadway was covered with water, and beside the road it was 3 feet high, and it rushed down and went each side of the bridge, right? No, it didn't, because each side of the bridge had nowhere for it to go, so it went onto the bridge and deposited a whole lot of shingle on the main road. 20 minutes later I came back. It was dry, but there was all this debris there, just for lack of simple maintenance. So we come back to right people, not with the
Okay,
wisdom.
thank you, Richard.
Thank you for your time, and I hope I've been of some help. But if we can do some of the things, and hopefully, not like Roland Clark said, he wasn't in favour of things that did two things at once. He said, I thought I was, remember Roland Clark? He said, I thought I was getting a cook and a mistress. I don't know about that, but she'd make wonderful soup.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, our next presenters are Rachel and James Thomas.
If you're addressing me, you need to shout a lot louder. I've spent
No,
$7,000 on them, they're not good in the performance.
No, Richard, you're all finished, mate. You're all finished. The next presenters are right behind you.
Thank you. Well, I am impressed that you're sacrificing the lunch hour. That's convincing. No, mate. Thank you. Good luck.
So to page 591. Welcome, team. So the floor is yours.
Hello, Mayor Brown and councillors. Thank you for hearing us today. My name's James Thomas and it's my wife Rachel. We're the new sort of custodians or family members to take on running Long Beach Estate, and 6th generation. As some of you are probably aware, Long Beach Estate has contains many historical buildings in different shapes and forms, some in good condition, some in not so good condition. Over the years, my parents and generations before have sort of done remedial work and kept buildings going, but there's still a lot to do. These buildings create an atmosphere and important history for the region. We host quite a lot of local and visitor events down there at Long Beach for a variety of reasons, so school fundraisers, different functions that we host, weddings and events, fundraising events for the Lions Club and local school as well, and not to mention just this public road that runs through the property, so you know local people, visitors to the area just come down and check it out, and they're always asking questions and seeing the buildings. We're sort of running through a process at the moment of assessing the buildings and determining their condition. There's a few that are up that need sort of immediate work, and we sort of tend to do a bit of work every year due to the cost of building increases and the difficulty of finding suppliers. This is getting trickier and trickier. We recently redid half of the homestead roof, and we had to get specialist guys in from Marlborough to do the work because of the nature of the work and the nature of the products being used. So today we'd just like to emphasise the importance of ADC maintaining the heritage grant, as we have accessed it in the past, and we think it's a really great thing that for not only our historic buildings but other historic buildings in the district as well.
And I think just building on what James has said, Long Beach is a real community it's a real community asset. So it's quite interesting living there because every week someone turns up and their relative used to work there or something. So what we really love about Long Beach is that it can be enjoyed by everyone, and we'd just really like to be able to continue to preserve what we've got there. Slightly, I guess, concerning for us is that the current government has cut heritage funding. So there used to be about 100k available per year. That was basically guaranteed, and it's 50% of the project cost. Now the criteria has changed. It doesn't really apply to us as much. So one of the criteria is of significance to Māori, which Long Beach is not of particular significance in that respect. So we're quite concerned now that we aren't going to be able to access that grant from central government. Basically, the pot has been reduced right down and likely to be reduced even further. So we are really hoping that ADC will continue to fund its heritage grant. And we've also made some suggestions in our submission just about how it could be administered. So, yeah, we're happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I've just got a question, and it's from your submission, and you've just said there may be opportunities to work with council to showcase the property. I'm going to be a wee bit cheeky and ask, is that through our economic development team or our promotions people? Is that what you're meaning?
Well, we look at Long Beach with all of these beautiful old buildings. An example of one is there's an old butchery, and we looked at it and we thought this would just be the most amazing museum one day. So something like that potentially, we see opportunities for us to be able to work with the council and, you know, developing another asset that the community can enjoy as well. So not specifically economic development, but yes, potentially.
Councillor Wilson.
It's from regarding the stock water, because since you're a downland farmer with a historic farm, how would the stock water closures affect you?
The only way that I can see it affecting us is with the closure of because we don't have any stock water races other than the drains that run through the farm. So we've got the drains which are part of the Eiffelton irrigation scheme. So I believe some of the stock water do terminate into those drains, but it wouldn't probably affect us much at all, other than maybe it could change the level, but I don't know really. All of our water is reticulated.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, thank you, Rachel and James, for coming along and presenting today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, Rachel Thomas David Ackland.
We've also got Daryl Hyde joining us too.
Okay. So welcome team, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council, for listening to us today and asking us questions, I hope. I'd just like to thank the Council, firstly, for the well-run long-term plan meetings. No one really had an excuse for not getting out and engaging. I thought that was a very well done and engaged process that we went through. And the meetings the meeting I attended and the Mount Summers meeting I know were well attended. And also with regards to the rural, the 2% rate rise for us in the rural sector is also, it shows, where that you're spreading the cost of this, where the investment needs to be with regards to your urban side of things, with, water infrastructure and that side of things, I think is also appreciated. The maintaining of the roading budget and the effort that you put in the previous period with regards to the roading budget also shows that you are focused on the critical infrastructure of this county that actually makes it efficient and profitable for us to have economic businesses in the district. And we fully support the second bridge effort that has gone into there to get to where it is today, but we also wish to see the continued lobbying of central government that they don't just see the second bridge as their investment in this community, as there is significant other road infrastructure within this community that needs to carry on in the same vein. And it would be very easy for central government to say, we've given you this, and say and promote it as that when we all know that it's been a long time coming. I suppose the most contentious one that has come up is the stock water question, and it's created a lot of conversation even amongst farmers. You know, some have invested in reticulation systems as they've built up irrigation assets and converted to dairy or other farm systems, and spent the money where they've had access to water. There are still those farms and those properties that don't have easy access to water, and the historicness of the stock water system, it can't be forgotten, even though legally, we can shut this system down. I think 120 odd years of investment does create sort of a moral obligation to make sure we do it in a way that is respectful for that past investment. And that is more with regards to the time frame. Yes, 3 years is could be considered a long period of time, but if we look at just the consultation side of it and trying to gather everyone together with who are going to be directly affected, that could just take 3 years in itself without then moving forward into actually shifting some of these properties and assets over onto other supplies. And I do realise we're running into a consenting or a consent boundary with regards to the takes for these stock water systems. So we feel that a stakeholder group should be established to help consider this process, and we're asking council to slow down this work, or not slow down this work, engage in this work so that it can be done in a fashion with consideration not only to the delivery of water, which this was primarily done, but in the development of these systems over time, they were built where water flowed, and that has a significant consideration into once the water has been taken, we still have these channels. What is that going to do to the stormwater infrastructure when we think about Methven Township and that side of things? Where does it flow beyond? So yes, it is a simple task just to turn the switch off, but it's the greater consideration. And my phone's just closed up on me. And that's pretty much it, isn't it, really? And, the work that was done around the Pudding Hill scheme and consideration of, what could be done, I think that's sort of part of the thought process we see should be developed out over the rest of the time. Thank you for...
Okay. Thank you, David. Questions? Councillor Wilson.
Morning, team. I'll start with the road. You've talked about full investment and no drop in the current levels. Do you accept that with increase in usage of some of the main roads, that there may be some reductions in service on some of the other roads, like some shingle roads less, big roads more, just to meet our budget parameters, or what's your view around that?
In any budget, in any consideration, you're given what, and we have to make best use of it. So, of course, there'll be consideration to make sure some assets are maintained at a higher level or need to be maintained more. But then it's a question of how much is that local, thinking of Thompson's Track, is that local traffic or is it now overflow traffic because of the congestion on State Highway 1? So, and then that comes to a question of lobbying central government with regards to that roading asset.
I'll just add to that as well. The Ashburton approach for funding roading is actually quite simple compared to other councils, so being funded on the general rate. What we're seeing across the country is that a lot of councils implement a UAGC component to fund roading, and that just helps to spread the cost because everybody has access to utilise the roads. Another way of doing it is using a differential for roading as well. So I guess if the council's having trouble in figuring out how to fund it, then potentially you need to look at the funding mechanism.
Okay, another question? It's pretty, sorry, Gerald, it's probably the similar question. Would you accept that there are different areas that may be closed at different times? In other words, by 3 years, we've put 3 years out there. but some areas could be closed a lot quicker and some would take a lot longer. So could we have a different time frame for different areas of stock water closures?
I have no issue with that at all. It's just that some areas are more difficult to tackle than other areas. There's irrigation assets in some areas and not in other areas. So there's complexities in different parts of that network. So no, I do agree with you there.
Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, David, Rachel, Daryl. We've heard from other farmers who are saying that they're paying $6,000 a year and want these stock water races shut ASAP. What do you say to them?
Well, we're actually hearing the same across our membership. So we've got members who deeply want it closed and also ones who really want it open. But obviously this is a wicked problem that the council is facing. It's been a problem for 50 years, 100 years, I don't know, a very, very long time. And we fully acknowledge that something does need to be done about it. Our concerns are more around the process in which you go to achieve that. So it does feel somewhat abrupt that in this long-term plan there's been a decision, a line drawn in the sand to just get out of it, kind of that's it. When there are some really strong groups and networks within the community that you could utilise to help aid that closure. So we are one of those groups. There's also the Mid-Canterbury Collective, different catchment groups across the district. So we're really just asking for you to look at the process in which you're going through to close the network.
Yeah, Brown.
Thanks. Thanks for your submission. So you're suggesting 10 years to exit out. We've got fish screens that need to go on these structures now. They're overdue, they're 6 years overdue. Could we be, if we stayed in it for 10 years and slowly exited, would we be spending capital on something that would be made redundant? Because they're not cheap putting these fish screens on.
No, and I realise that challenge, and I do. I suppose if there was if this council made the commitment to, or pushed back, and I don't know how much we can push back on this, and I agree with you that investment in the fish screen that's going to be redundant in 2032 is not no, that's just not an investment you should be making. I completely agree with you there, but is the investment needed to be saying to the regional council, look, this is a wicked problem, and it's finally come home to roost, but we do need to make sure that we make an equitable exit for all those people that have not quite realised the significance of the planning process that took place 15 years ago.
And another question, we had 3 irrigation companies in early yesterday morning, and they said that they could deliver water to most of the areas that we cover now, that council covers. Would that be a good solution in your view?
Well, I think that is part of the solution, isn't it? And that's we just feel that there's not the clarity around that, and we don't see how we can have clarity around that within the 3-year time frame. And then there is an investment that farmers will have to make on farm, and I personally agree that they should be probably making that investment now with regards to reticulated systems. Even if there's going to be a stock water provision to them, I don't see how they could have that around their property to still deliver stock water to their stock. I think that still that is an inefficient use of water. So I think that there is just a step process, and I think our submission is more around that we feel the steps are too quick, and that it could be broken down a little bit more.
Yeah, and you represent 700 odd farmers, I think, in your submission. You mentioned that. We've had submissions and got submissions and had people appear, farmers who say, we don't want these stock water races, we want them gone. Are you representing them, or are they separate to your representation?
Well, I'd say we'd have members with similar views. I think what we're representing is the fact that when these stock water races were brought in, they allowed the collective settlement of Mid-Canterbury, and we wish to see that those that are on the removal of this asset, that no one's left behind. So it's that we could have said back in 1880 that the Great Estates maintained the control of water. We just want to make sure it's equitable exit.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Thank you for your submission. In there, you've made a comment on the second bridge and ensuring that that's not delayed any further. Do you agree also in that, though, it should be talked about the way that it's funded? Because if the government makes us wear our standard fare rate on that, it means our ratepayers are up for a lot of money. So do you agree part of the lobbying should be the funding of the second bridge as well?
Yeah, I think any lobbying to reduce the cost to our community, direct cost to community when it's of a national benefit, I think is critical, yes.
Councillor Muckle.
Thank you. David and team, I'm just wondering, you said that the process has been going for 15 years and there's been stock races shut down over that time, etc. Why do your members feel blindsided now that there's a 3-year period when they've known for 15 years there was this in the wind?
Because I think we've harvested the easy fruit. And so the ones that are left are the more difficult ones to tackle. So there hasn't been an economic provision for it. So we're only dealing with a few, but it's making sure that those few can access it and can invest in it. And so I think, and personally, I don't think the time frame's big enough to actually tackle some of these infrastructure projects to get water to the gateways of these properties. There's deep water in some of these communities where there's no irrigation asset nearby. So I think 3 years is a good enough period to get the plan in place, but I don't think we'll achieve the goal of removing these assets. Even within the Mount Simmers village, we have a stockwater race that runs through that village, and it's currently used and it has been used in a firefighting capacity in that village, because you cannot hook into the hydrants of the village because it will collapse the main system. So there is other uses for some of these races within the community as well.
Councillor Wilson.
You've talked about the UAGC and the council should fully utilise it at 30%. Should we advocate for a higher or a lower? What do you think about that? Just a comment on the UAGC.
We're fully in support of advocating for no limit on the UAGC. And I think we've made comments elsewhere in the submission about reducing funding for other activities that would then free up some space for the UAGC as well, because we appreciate that you operate fully at the 30% cap, and we're very thankful for that.
No further questions? Thank you, Rachel and Dave, for presenting this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Brings the morning session to a close. We'll break for lunch and back at 1 p.m.